Some moments in history are loud. Explosions, revolutions, declarations of war. They are impossible to ignore. But other moments, the ones that truly change the world, happen in complete silence. A quiet signature on a forgotten document, a handshake in a desert palace, a deadline that passes without fanfare. And on June 9th, 2024, one of those silent moments occurred. A 50-year-old agreement, the bedrock of the US dollar's global dominance, quietly expired. And the mainstream media said nothing. The White House issued no statement. The financial news networks were busy talking about the latest tech stock. But in the halls of power, from Riyadh to Beijing, the silence was deafening. Because this was not just the end of an agreement. This was the end of an era. The petrodollar is dead. And Saudi Arabia, America's most important and complicated ally in the Middle East, just pulled the trigger. They have killed the system that made the dollar king, and they have done it without firing a shot. The media is silent because they don't understand what just happened. Or worse, they do, and they are terrified to tell you. To understand the earthquake that just happened, you have to go back 50 years to 1974. The United States had just abandoned the gold standard. The dollar was no longer backed by anything tangible, and the world was losing faith. President Nixon and his brilliant, ruthless Secretary of State Henry Kissinger knew they needed to create a new reason for the world to demand dollars. They needed a new backing. They chose oil. They flew to Saudi Arabia and struck a deal that would define the next half-century of global power. The terms were simple. The US would provide the Saudi royal family with unlimited military protection and political support. In exchange, Saudi Arabia, as the leader of OPEC, would do two things. One, they would only sell their oil in US dollars. Two, they would take the excess dollars they earned and recycle them back into the United States by buying US Treasury bonds. This was the birth of the petrodollar system. And it was a stroke of geopolitical genius. It created a permanent, artificial global demand for the US dollar. Every country in the world that needed to buy oil, which was every country, first had to buy US dollars. This allowed the United States to run massive trade deficits and print money with impunity, because there was always a global demand for our currency. It was the ultimate free lunch, and it was all guaranteed by our relationship with Saudi Arabia. That guarantee is now gone. The 50-year security agreement officially expired on June 9th, 2024. And unlike in the past, it was not renewed. For the first time in 50 years, Saudi Arabia is no longer obligated to price its oil in US dollars. They are free to sell their oil in any currency they choose: Chinese yuan, Russian rubles, euros, or, most likely, a new BRICS currency backed by gold. This is not a theoretical threat. It is already happening. Saudi Arabia has been invited to join the BRICS alliance. They have already begun settling oil trades with China in yuan. They are participating in Project mBridge, a central bank digital currency project with China, the UAE, and Hong Kong, designed to bypass the dollar-based SWIFT system entirely. Why would they do this? Why would they abandon a deal that has made them fabulously wealthy and secure for 50 years? Because the world has changed. The deal no longer serves their interests. First, the United States is no longer a reliable partner. The chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, the shifting policies towards Iran, and the general sense of American decline have convinced the Saudis that the US military guarantee is not what it used to be. They are looking for new protectors, and they see them in the rising power of the East, China. China is now Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner. They are building military and economic ties that are deeper and more reliable than their fraying relationship with Washington. Second, the United States is no longer their biggest customer. Thanks to the shale revolution, the US is now a major oil producer itself. The biggest buyer of Saudi oil is China. It no longer makes sense for them to conduct their most important business in the currency of a declining customer and a rising rival. Third, they see the writing on the wall for the US dollar. They see the $34 trillion in debt. They see the political chaos. They see the Federal Reserve printing money into oblivion. They know that the dollar is a sinking ship, and they are securing their own lifeboat. They are diversifying their wealth out of dollar-denominated assets and into gold, infrastructure, and partnerships with the new center of global economic gravity, the BRICS nations, and so they let the deal expire. Quietly. No press conference, no announcement, just a silent, deadly move in the global chess game. The media's silence on this is the most damning part of the story. Why are they incompetent? Do they not understand the significance of the petrodollar? Or is the story being suppressed? Are they being told by their political masters in Washington not to report on this for fear of causing a panic? For fear of triggering a run on the dollar? Either way, the result is the same. The American people are being kept in the dark about the single greatest threat to their financial well-being. The foundation of the dollar's power has been kicked out from under it. The artificial demand that has kept our economy afloat for 50 years is gone. What happens next? It won't be instantaneous, but it will be relentless. As more and more oil trades are settled in other currencies, the global demand for dollars will slowly but surely dry up. Trillions of dollars that are currently held in reserve by foreign nations will start to flow back to the United States. It's the financial equivalent of a tsunami building offshore. This massive influx of dollars will trigger a level of inflation that will make the past few years look trivial. The Federal Reserve will be powerless to stop it. The value of your savings, your pension, your 401k, all priced in dollars, will be decimated. The American standard of living, built on the back of a currency the world was forced to use, will come to an end. The petrodollar is dead. Saudi Arabia pulled the trigger. The media is silent. And the financial storm is coming. Let's analyze the profound implications of this silent maneuver. The petrodollar system was more than just a financial arrangement. It was the primary pillar of American geopolitical dominance in the post-gold standard era. It allowed the U.S. to export its inflation to the rest of the world. The Federal Reserve could print money to fund domestic programs and foreign wars, and the negative consequences, the devaluation of the currency, were absorbed by the global demand for dollars to buy oil. This exorbitant privilege is now gone. The decision by Saudi Arabia is the culmination of a decade-long strategic realignment. The kingdom has recognized that the future of energy demand is not in the West, but in the East. China is already the world's largest importer of oil, and its demand is only projected to grow. For Saudi Arabia, aligning with China is not just a political choice, it is an economic necessity. They are securing their largest customer for the next 50 years. Furthermore, the weaponization of the dollar against Russia provided a stark warning to every nation that is not a direct vassal of the United States. The seizure of Russia's foreign currency reserves demonstrated that the dollar is not a neutral asset. It is a tool of American foreign policy. For a proud sovereign nation like Saudi Arabia, the idea that their national wealth could be confiscated at the whim of politicians in Washington was an unacceptable risk. The move away from the dollar is a move towards financial sovereignty. The media's silence on this issue is a critical part of the story. It reveals the deep-seated bias and the systemic failure of the Western financial press. Their business model is dependent on access to the very institutions, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, the major banks, that are most invested in maintaining the status quo. To report honestly on the demise of the petrodollar would be to risk that access. It would be to admit that the experts they have been quoting for decades were wrong. It would be to tell their audience that the foundation of their financial security is crumbling. And that is a truth they are unwilling or unable to tell. So what is the end game? As the dollar's role in the global oil trade diminishes, a multi-trillion-dollar hole will open up in the demand for the currency. This will not happen overnight, but it will be a steady, relentless bleed. The dollars that were once sent abroad to pay for oil will now stay at home, chasing a limited supply of goods and services. This is the textbook definition of inflation. Not the 3–4% the government lies about, but a structural double-digit inflation that will become a permanent feature of the American economy. The Federal Reserve will be powerless. They cannot raise interest rates high enough to stop this inflation without triggering a catastrophic collapse in the U.S. bond market and bankrupting the government. They will be forced to print more money to pay the interest on the national debt, which will only fuel the inflationary fire. This is the debt spiral that so many have warned about. And the end of the petrodollar is the event that triggers it. For the average American, the consequences will be dire. A permanent decline in the standard of living, a currency that loses value every single day, a future where the United States is just another debtor nation, struggling to pay its bills. The era of American exceptionalism, built on the back of a currency the world was forced to use, is over. The silent death of the Petrodollar agreement on a quiet Sunday in June was the moment it ended. And the vast majority of Americans have no idea it even happened.